What is up, assholes? Welcome to a long overdue episode of the weekly show. We're back at it with an absolute belter because we've got a lot of shit to cover. Les Gates just happened along with ENDURO Champs. We gotta address the Chainstay discussion. Memes have been flying all over the internet. Y'all are getting freaking crazy with this shit. $20,000 e-bike popped up on the Pink Bike homepage, so we gotta cover that. Give you guys an update on what the hell is going on with the biking scene in China, since I was just there. Check in on what the hell is going on in the mountain bike fashion world. And then, yeah, we got World Champs coming up this week. So a lot to get into. Let's fire it up. All right, so Les Gates, Leger. This was a wild race. To me, this was probably the most entertaining race of the year. Conditions were absolutely diabolical, and that's kind of what I want to see out of a World Cup race. It's maybe not every race, but seeing the best in the world challenged to like the max of their ability, where they're just struggling to put together a complete run. The track was super technical, and the time gaps were larger. Not the biggest we've seen, but the riders were struggling to put together clean runs, which just made actually watching the race super interesting. And this race really got me thinking about the time gaps, because I feel like there's been this push for tighter and tighter time gaps, with the justification being that it makes for more exciting races. And this race in Leger just made me kind of realize that, for me at least, that's absolutely not the case. I found this race so engaging, with the riders taking different lines, struggling through sections, struggling to put together a clean run. And when I compare that to a track like Andorra, I felt like I was kind of checked out of that race. On those style of tracks, like every rider looks really similar. I feel like there's it's less engaging from just a visual perspective. The race isn't just an accumulation of splits and times. It's like we're watching the art of riding a bicycle. And when the track kind of narrows it down and funnels people into just taking a single line and going really fast, it's harder to differentiate between the riders. And if we didn't have the splits, it's like everyone looks really similar. But in Leger, I mean, people were all over the place, getting out of shape, sending gaps. We don't need every track to be, diabolical like Leger, but I don't think we should be pushing the sport to get to narrower time gaps just for the sake of narrower time gaps, because I think it misses the bigger picture. And to me, more technical tracks that result in bigger time gaps are just way more dramatic and engaging to watch. I mean, think of the runs we remember, throughout the years. Like, those are big time gap races.
Also, Martin Mays getting second on flat pedals is nuts. That dude is a wizard, man. He's been around for so long, and he had success early in enduro, and for him to still be going fast, putting on a pair of flat pedals, sending it into second place, like, props, dude. And his run was sick. Plus, he pulled back time on the bottom, which, you wouldn't expect on the flat pedals. So that's the highest flat pedals have scored in a long-ass time. So props Martin Mays for holding it down. I was stoked on that.
Let me know what you guys think, but this race got me super fired up. But moving on to more racing, we had Enduro World Championships, and we had Richie Rude taking it home in the men's field, only his third enduro race this year. Richie isn't the most expressive rider all the time, but I mean, you could tell that winning that race was a big deal. And honestly, it is. Getting the world champs, but also after the year he's had, having some struggles in downhill. And the dude is just a beast. And we did get to watch the last stage live on YouTube, so that's a dub. Although the coverage was kind of janky, it was cool that it existed. They're trying, and yeah, you could just see, even in that, like, I feel like just wills his way into speed. Like, I don't know, I love watching Richie ride in race runs. I've been able to witness it here and there over the years, and I don't know, that dude is, when he's in a race run, it's like he just will not be denied. Like, nothing stops him. And whether his feet are off the pedals, whether he's foot stomping his way through switchbacks, it's just like the momentum and like the minimum speed he carries everywhere. I don't know, it's really fun to watch. And then in the women's field, Ellie Hoskin took the win. she's kind of come out of nowhere this season and put together 2 World Cup wins and world champion now. I feel like this is maybe the start of the changing of the guards in the women's field. I mean, you can only think Ellie's going to be competing for the overall next year. Ellie's riding is super impressive. I actually raced the Crankworks Enduro, and I'll say I had a pretty dismal race. I pulled out after 2 stages, but there was a stage that I struggled my way through. I made it to the bottom without crashing. Not my best work, but Ellie did beat me on that stage. So these girls are absolutely hauling ass, and I would hope that Ellie gets some good support next year, because she's kind of on a privateer program right now, and that doesn't quite fit with world championship credentials. That's pretty much it for the enduro season, and yeah, I hope that enduro can kind of make a comeback. And just with the industry and everything right now, I feel like it's still, these athletes are still struggling to get the support that they were a few years ago, because the racing is still at an insanely high level. But moving on, we have to address the Chainstay conversation. This shit's been getting wild, guys. I feel like it's kind of gone mainstream. It feels like the 27.5 versus 2.9 wheel size debate. You know, Pink Bike's posting freaking clickbait articles about, you know, choose your side, you know, opinion pieces. The memes have been flying. There's this whole Jeff Kendall versus me thing, which is completely blown out of proportion. But I'm just gonna talk about this. The main thing I want to touch on is the Pink Bike article, actually. What kind of annoyed me about this article is, you know, Seb Scott actually brought up some good points that I think usually are missed. You know, he talks about chainstay in relation to bar height and stack and how it weights the front wheel, all these things. I'm like, okay, he's informed about this issue. All right, I'm getting on board here. But he completely neglects to mention the whole conversation about size and proportionality and front to rear center ratio. It's like, bro, this is kind of what it's all about. Like, yeah, Jeff Kendall is stoked on his 435, 440 stays because he's a medium. You know, for us vertically gifted people, the whole equation's different. I mean, I guess it's the same, but we're trying to, you know, have the same equation. We're getting freaking lopped off over here, and our bikes have no front end grip. So no hate to Pink Bike as a whole, but that article was definitely missing a huge part of the conversation. That's at the core of this argument. You know, I'm not saying mediums should have 460 stays. I'm just saying larges there should at least be options for 460 stays. And my whole take is, in a large, like, there's just diminishing returns to going shorter than 445. It's like, all right, yes, it will be more playful, but you start giving up like most of the bike's rideability in flat corners and just, you know, cornering in general. And, you know, going 460 plus will get you benefits and stability and front end grip, but then you start going, you know, to more and more trade-offs that kind of affect just like the ease of rideability of the bike. That's all I'm saying here is, like, generally, and you know, it all comes back to the ratio, 1.8-ish front to rear center ratio, but that is like a representation of, we should just be in this range, you know, and we can debate in it, and there's taste, but like, and the bikes I've been riding recently have kind of been a representation of that. But thanks Pinkish Bike and a few other guys for the memes. I got a good laugh out of that one. And thanks for the mentions in the comments. My goal coming into this wasn't to be the Chainstay daddy, but if you guys want Chainstay daddy, daddy's here. Don't worry. I'm taking care of the fucking issue. I'm going to keep fighting the good fight. So don't let these short chainstayers slander you too much. Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, like, if someone's designing a bike, whether they thought about this before or not, like, I feel like the conversation is, they've got to be at least thinking about it. Like, if they release a bike in a large with a 435 rear end, it's like, yep, their ass is getting roasted online. So yeah, the Long Chainstay gang has some freaking clout. It's really not that deep, but it's like, it makes a difference. So it's sweet that there seems to be at least a vocal faction of people out there who have had the same experiences as me. So anyway, moving on. A $20,000 e-bike popped up on the internet the other day. the Specialized Levo 4 Special Edition. And this is gonna make a lot of people angry. I don't know why. You know, it exists. You don't gotta buy it. It's a little ridiculous, sure. But from a business perspective, like, of course, it makes sense. Like us mountain bikers, we know, like, oh, all these parts, like, they don't make that big of a difference. But there is a faction of people out there that are monetarily gifted. And the most reliable way to know that you're getting a good product is just to give me the most expensivest thing. Like, these people, most of the time, they don't really want to talk to the salespeople, you know, or learn about, you know, the high-speed compression and the lateral compliance of the podium or whatever. They're just like, give me the most expensivest one, and they're gonna sell. So yeah, the poors are always gonna think this is ridiculous. Performance on these parts are such marginal gains that the Levo freaking expert is gonna be 98% of what this bike is. I mean, I rode a Santa Cruz Vala for the e-bike shootout. That was pretty much in line with this $20,000 Levo. It had a push fork, push shock, trick stuff maximum brakes, carbon wheels, like the whole nine. I think we priced it out to $19,000. And it was amazing to ride, but at the end of the day, I would have still chosen the Crafty over that bike, personally. So the parts you hang off it still aren't the most important part. I mean, all those parts worked really well. I love the trick stuff brakes. The push suspension was quite good, but you know, it doesn't like transform the riding experience. It gets into like the bling fashion realm, really. Like, that's what this bike is about. So don't get too bent out of shape about this. I'm honestly surprised there aren't more bikes like this. Anyway, moving on to China. China. So I was just in China. First episode of that whole experience dropped yesterday, so check that out if you haven't yet. But I was over there to race a prototype enduro bike that's being developed by this Chinese trials company that's, you know, getting into the mountain bike world with the all-new design, linkage design by Cascade. But I'll be covering most of that in the vlogs that'll be coming out over the next week or so. But I just wanted to talk about the mountain biking scene in China in general. I feel like Asia gets absolutely no coverage from the mainstream mountain bike media. And I mean, I guess it's kind of fair because the scene is super small compared to what's going on over here, but that is changing. The riding scene in China is absolutely on the up. There's a ton of young riders getting into the sport. The industry of companies making parts and bikes to sell into China for the Chinese market is pretty significant, and I think it's only going to start to grow. And I think there's going to be a lot of these companies that develop their brand in China that are eventually going to want to sell in the US. You know, Lewis is somewhat of an example of that, but I think a lot of these bike brands and companies are starting to get to that level. The rider base over there is super young, mainly. And there's a few groups of kids that are going to New Zealand, Whistler, riding all around the world, and they're developing some pretty quality riding in China. The resort I was at in Fulong was really well done. Not a lot of technical trails, but honestly, like, their flow and jump trails and corners were really, really good. Snowboarding and skiing really took off in China a handful of years ago, and it's kind of been this, like, maybe fad isn't the right word, but you know, it gets a ton of hype, it goes viral, and then there's just this massive influx of people interested in the sport. And I think the sparks are starting to fly with that, with mountain biking in China. So keep your eye out for some Chinese riders, you know, breaking out onto the international race circuit in the next 4 to 5 years. There are definitely some fast kids out there. You know, one of them beat me. And even in Taiwan, I was there earlier in the year too, and I kind of got that same sentiment there. But yeah, in this town, there were like 6 different bike shops, like right close to the resort. And we went out for dinner and we're coming back at like 9:30, 10. And there's just like 40 or 50 kids hanging out at the bike shop, you know, jumping off curbs, doing wheelies. And like, the shop was sick, decked out with the nicest stuff. Honestly, a shop that would be up to Western standards. And there's just 30 kids hanging out at the bike shop at 10 o'clock, you know, just stoked on bikes. So that's not something I've seen really anywhere else in the world. And the whole festival and race out there had a lot of energy behind it. The whip off went crazy. I'll have a video of that dropping soon. the mountain bike scene in China and Asia in general is absolutely on the up. So keep an eye out for that. We're almost done here, guys, but last couple things to touch on is the fad of baggy jean shorts and like thrift store fits. I was in Whistler, and I mean, if you watched my trend forecast, I mean, I think this is obvious, guys, you know, you've seen it, but you know, my trend forecast last year, I predict, you know, this sort of style is definitely in, and it's getting to the peak of kind of blown out. Like if you're 20 years old and younger, good chances are you've got some baggy vintage tee with a Fox chest protector, baggy jean shorts, Vans, flat pedals, a D4 with Smith or Oakley, you know, a few variations here and there, but generally that's the fit. And while it's different, it's like a more like core version of this vibe. I think it's almost like the second coming of the party shirt. Don't get offended, but hear me out. It's like the same pitch. It's like, oh, you know, you can be like riding the bike park, but it's like casual, and then you can like show up to the bar and like have a, you know, be like casually fitted up and like have a beer with your friends. It's like the pitch is the same on the denim thrift store fit as it is with the party shirt. It just, one applies to out of touch, uninteresting millennials and up, and then the other appeals to like Gen Z, 20 years old and younger. But both are trying to accomplish the same thing. Just like the party shirts, you know, we've got companies coming in, like Darko just released like a Darko branded baggy jean short. And it's like, okay, once we got companies like diving in and trying to capitalize on this trend, you know, it's a sign that it's kind of getting blown out. And I don't really have like a conclusion on all this. It's just an observation, is what it is. You know, trying to dress as a mountain biker is a losing game one way or another. So pick your battles. You're going to look like a kook no matter what. But yeah, interesting development with the fits out there. The amount of kids and people I saw in that fit at Whistler was like ridiculous. You know, you can do what you want, but at the very least now you ain't being original with that stuff. You know, definitely feeling like an unk these days, out of touch with the younger generation. Got to give you guys a little smoke every once in a while. But yeah, that's what's going on in the world of mountain bike fashion. But I think that's about it. World Champs is happening at Champery. Iconic venue. Man, if you don't know about Champery, you know, go look up Sam Hill's running Champery. I feel like it was 2007. But yeah, iconic venue. I've actually ridden there. It's steep, but it's kind of bike parked out a little bit. I'm curious if they run any fresh sections. But when I rode it, it was just like really steep, rough, but like kind of bike parky. So I'm interested to see how it's gonna race. But yeah, iconic venue. I heard it's gonna rain, so maybe we get another diabolical shit show of a race where people are struggling to get down the hill. You know, maybe not fun for the riders, but I'm down to watch that shit. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hit me up on Patreon if you liking this shit. There's a bunch of stuff on there right now. I'm doing exclusive Q&As. And if you're too broke to do that, at least hit the subscribe button. Helps me out with what I'm doing here. And yeah, we're on the gas. I've got a downhill bike shootout that I'm doing in Tennessee in the next few weeks. Super excited about that. We're putting together at least 6 downhill bikes to test with my buddy Nick. And yeah, Patreon's going to get all that stuff early too. So lots of good stuff coming on the channel. Thanks for supporting. Thanks for watching. And I'll catch you later.